What year's your Mustang?
It is a 2014.
Nice.
So
okay.
I had bought it. It was a rental car, and I got a really super good deal on it, and it was there wasn't much, if anything, was wrong with it. So I paid cash for that sucker. I'm like, here, and then and then they sat there for 2 hours while they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with the check.
Oh, geez, because companies aren't used to getting paid in cash anymore.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And so meanwhile, there's people coming in and out, have purchasing cars, and we're just sitting there while they're sitting there trying to figure out, what are we going to do with this check?
Brent's car purchasing tip for all of you who are listening is what you do is you fax all the dealers in your area. There's a fleet department, and the fleet department is used to just taking requests from businesses. If you ever have to buy a new car, you just fax them and you say, here's the make and model that I want. These are the colors I'm willing to accept. These are the options that I must have. Any other options are okay, but these are the ones that I have to have. Now, the lowest price that comes back via fax on this day, I'm just going to go down and buy it. And fleet dealers are used to doing this. They'll pencil a thing back on the piece of paper, fax it right back to you along with the salesperson's phone number, and off you go. So the last time when I bought my Jeep, I did that exact thing. I just faxed it out to all the Jeep dealers within like 200 miles. These are the colors I'm willing to accept. I have to have air conditioning and automatic transmission. Everything else I'm willing to pay for, but if it doesn't have that, that's okay. And one of them came in like $6,000 less than all of the other dealers. They're like, yep,
wow.
We had this thing sitting on the lot for forever. You're welcome to come in and get it. Garland says, who uses faxes anymore? Fleet departments.
They're the people. They're the people that's clogging up the phone lines, which is making our internet so expensive.
So folks, feel free to get in your technical questions. We'll start going through those now. Gigi asks, how do you validate backups using the backup set table? If I've got a failover cluster and I fail over to another node, does backup set get moved around? Backup set is in a MSDB. So as long as you're in a failover cluster, all the databases fail over together. Where you get caught is in an availability group, because in an availability group, only the user databases fail over. So there's a different copy on every single server. The way that you would check that, one way you could do it is with SP all night log, SP Blitz backups. I'm going to go open up on the webcast over in browser here. If you search for SP Blitz backups, this is a stored procedure that we've written that will actually go out and centralize your backup data from multiple servers in an always-on availability group. So then you can push all of the data into one central MSDB repository. That's SP Blitz backups. It'll also do things like tell you whether or not you are missing backups, what your worst case recovery point objective is, your worst case recovery time objective is, you name it. Thomas says, he says, if I remember right, sometimes companies hire you guys to help them find new DBAs. Do you guys see many people hiring mid-level DBAs? I see almost nothing but senior DBA positions out there. Richie, I'm going to ask you, have you ever seen a position for a mid-level developer?
Actually, yes. I've actually hired mid-level developers, but here's the thing. A lot of times when companies say senior folks, they're actually looking for mid-level folks. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of times the mid-level folks don't know they're senior because they've been mid-levels for such a long time. They never really thought, well, what's a senior and what's not? A lot of times that's just a title. They're looking just for DBA, and, it's hey, we just have senior and junior, and that's all we have. And if you think that you take a look at the qualifications and you like the company and take a look at the responsibilities and it's somewhere along the lines of what you do, go ahead and submit your application. What's the worst they could say? No. What's the worst that could happen? You go into an interview and they say you're not what we're looking for. Oh, cry, one single tear, at that point, but you've made connections, and then you could start asking, well, what type of things are you looking for a senior DBA? And then they start looking for we're looking for this, and this, and then you start going off and you start learning. Well, maybe I need to learn more about clusters. Maybe I start learning more about Linux if they're doing Linux or whatever that is. And so then you can start becoming more of that senior dude.
Yeah. The problem with mid-level jobs usually is that it implies that there's 3 levels. The company has to be large enough to have senior people and junior people and mid-level. So it's fairly large teams. It's so rare that you see a DBA team that large that they have, 3 different tiers of DBAs. I'm with Richie in that if you think you're mid-level, you're probably actually a senior. Think about the number of years you've spent working on SQL Server, even if your job title wasn't Senior DBA or even just Junior DBA. I was a developer for like 7, 8 years working with SQL Server before I had DBA in my, I know it's hard for Richie to believe. I was the world's worst developer. I suck so bad. Oh. It just picture, that T-SQL code you're working through. Oh, my Visual Basic code was way worse than that. Way worse than that. True story. There's a company right now that's still using the intranet that I built for them back in 99 and 2000. Built a whole intranet for them. The reason why they haven't been able to get off of it is I built the whole thing in Macromedia Dreamweaver UltraDev, which built source code into DLLs, and they can't find the source code. So they're like, we don't know what your logic was you were building all these rules, and we don't have a copy of the laptop or whatever. We deleted everything. So, yeah.
I mean, I talked to Cecil, my co-host at Wait for Keyboard yesterday, and we were actually talking about that. What's the difference between a mid-level developer and a senior developer? And a lot of times it's not the actual code. The code is very similar from a senior to a mid-level, but the difference is what you do outside of it. Like most of the work that I do is documentation. It's putting things into source control. It's, doing things around the code that, so when the next person comes in, hey, everything is good. And I know exactly what we were supposed to be doing and things like that. And it's those things that make a senior for a developer and not necessarily, oh, I know how to do this algorithm so much faster.
Uh-huh. It leads more towards architect. You're setting policies, designing, here's why we want to do something. Just determining where it makes sense to cut corners, where it doesn't make sense to cut corners, being confident enough in your own skills that you can make those decisions. Thomas,
I'll get there someday, Brent. I swear. I will get there someday.
Yeah, but then I'm worried you're going to get a better job. I need to keep you in a $25,000 a year job as long as I can.
Yeah, especially here in Miami, I
Yes.
I got a can of beans this month, so it was good.
Woohoo! Next month, I'm going to get you the bread. I promise.
No, roast. We need the roast. I mean, we can't just have black beans without the rice.
Oh, jeez. Thomas follows up with, he says, yeah, Pat Phelan and Ed Layton Dick both tell me that I'm not mid-level, but I still feel that way, probably because I compare myself to guys like them and you. Well, remember, I always think of it as like this pyramid type scheme where you're always looking up. You're always looking up at people you admire, and there comes a point where you're like, wait a minute, those 2 people you admire are bloggers and user group leaders. Mm-hmm. If you think about most senior DBAs out there, they're not leading a user group. They're not writing blogs. They're not giving back. They're just putting in their 9 to 5 at different companies. And I'm not saying that it's bad to put in 9 to 5. It's not. You should have border lines around what you do on your family time, your weekend time, etc. But when you're idolizing those people like that, those are incredible overachievers. They're just working their tails off in terms of also giving back to the community or whatever. Everybody looks up to people like that. So that's very different.
Yeah, what's funny is when I was consulting and kind of going from kind of place to place, I would be surprised if a senior DBA knew what they were doing.
Right?
Yes. Yes. So, I mean, when you start seeing that, it's like, okay, now you start understanding senior is just a title that is kind of given. It's kind of like chief executive officer supposed to have this big strategy and stuff like that. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they know people and they kind of wiggle their way up to the top. Same thing with DBAs. You kind of get know people and you've kind of done the right things the right way once, and then they kind of just promote you because they don't want to lose said person that knew that one thing that nobody else wants to get their hands dirty with. Mm-hmm. So my guess is if those guys are saying that you're senior. Just, deal with it, breathe in, breathe out, and, see what your next step is.
Buck Woody has that great saying, have you got 10 years of experience or have you got the same 1 year of experience that you've done 10 times in a row?
Yeah.
And there's so many people who say that they're senior when they're not really, all they've really done is just spend 10 years in a row at the same job. I'm going to go off on a tangent here. There's a couple of other questions in the queue, but I'm going to spend a little bit more time digging into this one. If you have other technical questions, feel free to go ahead and follow those up in the Q&A. In the meantime, I'm going to hold on and focus on Thomas's thing here for a second. Being a senior means that you focus really deeply on a couple of things inside the SQL Server engine. The SQL Server engine is so big and encompasses so many technologies, and they change every year. No one can be an expert on all of them. Those of you who are listening to the podcast can't see the list up on the screen, but on the screen here I've got always encrypted, distributed availability groups, R services, all these things that no one person can know. Even those of us with fake jobs like consultants who get to sit around and learn all the time, we can't learn all this stuff. I don't even know a third of the stuff that's in there on that screen. So when I think about what a person does, I come up with this eight bulleted items in this list here. I go all the way from designing tables down to installing and configuring SQL Server. And since I had a hard time understanding whether or not I was a senior on various things, what I did was I put together a little quiz. So take down and write from 1 to 8. Just take a little piece of paper, a notepad, whatever. Write down 1 through 8, and I'm going to give you a quick quiz to figure out whether or not you're a senior. Start with number 1. How often do I design new tables? Give yourself 1 point if you never design new tables. You deal with tables that other people made. 2 points if you do it a couple times a quarter. 3 points if you do it once a month, and 4 points if you do it every week and you're familiar with data modeling tools and books like Lewis Davidson's Relational Data Modeling book. Not everyone can score 4 points across the board. I'm a perfect example of that. I only score 1 point on this question because I never deal with Richie says 4 points. And you do. You've got like Lewis's book probably most likely.
Not only Lewis's book, but I also have the Data Model Patterns book, like volumes 1 through 3.
Yeah, because you do it. I mean, you're in there building tables. And as DBAs, I always thought, well, as a DBA, I must know how to do these things. Just because you know how doesn't mean you're doing it. I know how to replace a tire, but if you gauged my skills on how good I am at replacing tires, I would suck because I'd be out there reading the manual trying to figure out how to get the jack to work again.
Yeah, where's the notch under the car again?
Yes.
I don't understand.
Yes. Question 2, when I write new queries, give yourself 1 point if you use the same syntax you've been using for years, 2 points if you try new features every time they come out, like the new string splitting feature inside later versions of SQL Server, 3 points if you A/B test different features or different query plans often, and then 4 points if you know how to trick the optimizer into giving you the best plan. And I don't mean with a hint, I mean rewriting your T-SQL in a way that will make it consider to do different joins first. Question 3, when I deploy new changes, give yourself 1 point if you do it live, give yourself 2 points if you script it out first and then test it in a development environment, 3 points if you script it out, test it, and document the change that you were expecting, like changing MAXDOP from 8 to 4 will cut CX packet weights, and then monitor afterwards to make sure you got the change you expected. And yes, I mean server level and database changes as well, like SP configure settings. Then give yourself 4 points if you check the changes into source control, someone else tests them, and they're deployed in an automated fashion. Question 4, when I tune queries, give yourself 1 point if you kind of bumble around, point and click, and you're not really sure how to read those execution plans. 2 points if you know how to apply a missing index recommendation and when you shouldn't. 3 points if you know how to handcraft an index recommendation without seeing one in the query plan. Like you can just read the query and you know exactly what kind of index you need to create and what fields need to go first. And then 4 points if you can recognize when you're getting the wrong kind of join given your types of indexes and how you can influence SQL Server to pick a different one. Question 5, when they say that SQL Server is slow, give yourself 1 point if you're completely surprised, 2 points if you know what metrics to look at, 3 points if you know what your server's baselines are for that metrics. And 4 points, you knew about it because your monitoring tool told you, and you don't have any email rules set up to push those alerts into a different folder. Question 6, when SQL Server goes down, give yourself 1 point if you didn't know the end users had to call you. 2 points if you remote desktop in and start clicking around. 3 points if you know what logs you need to hit in which order and you know how long it'll take in order to fail over to your secondary. And then 4 points if you grab your customized checklist and you start working through the steps in order, documenting as you go because you have a standardized triage process.
So how many points do I get if I just call Eric? Is that
yeah, you're a developer. I think that gives you 10 points. I think that's perfect.
Woohoo!
Question 7, when I install SQL Server, give yourself 1 point if you just run setup.exe, 2 points if you Google for a best practices checklist, 3 points if you grab your own customized checklist that includes your specific settings, and then 4 points if you do an automated installation and you've already got those files saved out somewhere. Last question, when I design high availability and disaster recovery, Richie's face is about like my face these days. Give yourself 1 point if all your instances are standalones, 2 points if you use the same instances or same techniques you've been using for years, like you only know clustering or you only know log shipping. 3 points if you know what the options are and then you work with the business to pick a solution, like you know several, clustering, replication, always on availability groups, database mirroring, all those things. And then 4 points if you get the business's RPO and RTO requirements in writing, and then you give them budget estimates in order to meet those requirements. Now, when you look at your answers, being a senior doesn't mean that you're a 3 or a 4 across the whole entire list. Being a senior means you're a 3 or a 4 in your areas of expertise. So if you're a database developer, I expect you to have a 3 or a 4 around designing tables or writing queries. And you might be pushing 2 or 3, maybe if I'm lucky, down under tuning queries or deploying changes. But I don't expect you to be monitoring performance.
That is accurate because the last 3 questions, I was garbage.
Right? Of course. And I'm the same way in reverse. Like when it comes to design, I'm more of a development DBA or production DBA over here. When it comes to designing tables, I'm garbage. You know, can I do it? Sure. I create table statements all the time for demos, but you don't want me modeling your data warehouse. I have no business doing that.
No.
So Michael says, are these questions available on the Brent Ozar website somewhere? I'd really like to go through and grade myself. Dang, we just went through them, Chief. These are from our Senior DBA class. They'll actually be in the webcast recording, though, so you'll be able to watch it in our YouTube channel or watch it on the blog. It'll come out on Monday. These questions are often usually surprising to people because people think they're really, I hear over and over again, people go, I do everything. I do that entire stack. Yeah, but you suck. When we look at your points, you're a 1 or a 2 across the board. You're not a senior. You're much more what I would call a junior. You have lower scores even in an area of your specialization. Now you start to understand what it would be like to be a senior in one of those columns, and you can decide exactly which areas you want to specialize in, which areas you want to get better in. All right, so hopefully, Thomas, that gives you a rough idea about where you're at. Next up, now we'll go back to our regularly scheduled slide deck. Richie, any thoughts that you had out of that one before we keep going?
I really love how you could just like jump into a slide deck and just go at it. It's like me, if I have to pick something up I haven't picked up in a while, it's like, all right, no, I need like 3 days and I need to go through it. I need to practice my, and no, Brent just goes right into it. Boom.
Here we are, live. Do it.
Do it live.
When I used to, for a while there, last year, we had several, and 2 years ago, we had several setups where I was doing 2 weeks of back-to-back training. I would do 2 weeks of classes and I would fly to Newark or whatever, Atlanta, do 2 weeks of back-to-back training. Literally, I would walk out of the classroom at the end of a day. I would go straight to the hotel room. I would order room service, and I'd start reviewing the next day's slide decks because you don't even have your choice. You have to move so fast.
You lost me at Newark. You lost me there. I can't figure out why you went to Newark, but
You lost me at Newark as well. Newark is not a, the people in Newark were nice. City, not so nice. Doug asks a question. He says, I use Ola's backup solution, Ola Hollingren's backup solution. I had a database backup that got hung. After 48 hours, I canceled it. Rollback says it's going to take 4 days and is increasing. Should I ride it out or restart the services at night during a maintenance window? I went through this exact same thing with a client. The best thing I can recommend is call Microsoft support immediately. I had 2 cases where one, I restarted the instance and we were fine. The second, MSDB was in recovery for an extended period of time. So I just worry about you restarting the server and running into the in recovery thing. Calling Microsoft for support just gets you that layer of insurance with your company that everybody understands the risk that's involved and it's not your butt on the line. Opening a Microsoft support case is $500. That's totally worth it.
Yeah, what's the worst rollback you've ever had, Brent?
4 days.
4 days.
Had a multi-terabyte data warehouse. Go ahead.
Wow, 2 months.
2 months?
I had a rollback that went 2 months.
Why on earth would you keep it going? I would restore from a backup at that point.
Well, it wasn't my call, right?
Okay.
So what I did is that I was able to take a development database and utilize processing on that. And so the operation was continuing to run. So the DBA thought that, hey, he could have as much time as he wanted to get production back up and running. Meanwhile, we're down development database. But there was a lot of work that I needed to do to get that up and running. But yeah, 2 months. And then they gave the guy a raise at the end of the year. And I'm like, but his rollback took 2 months. It's like, how many Microsoft calls did he actually have, to make sure that, 2 months. And it's because he had his partitions incorrect and they were just, there was a lot of problems with that one.
I can almost imagine him coming into work every day and not even going straight to the computer, going to the coffee machine first, getting the coffee. All right, then I'll go check on my rollback.
Yeah. Oh, still going on. All right. Well, let me go read this book I've got here.
It's terrible. Paul asks, he says, we were an early adopter of SQL Server 2014, and we handed I'm going to have to read this thing a few times to understand what he's saying. We were an early adopter of SQL Server 2014. We're now moving to 2016. We're worried about what compatibility mode we should be in, 2012 or 2016. What am I going to hit when I get surprised with moving to the 2016 cardinality estimator? Here's my advice on that. When you go to 2016, stay in 2012 compat mode. If you were in 2012 compat mode today, stay there. It's working for you just fine. Leave it there for the first, say, 2 weeks. After the smoke is settled, when people go, oh, okay, this 2016 thing, it's not so bad. Consider flipping on Query Store. Query Store is like a black box recorder for your query plans. Make sure that it doesn't kill you in terms of server performance because it does have known gotchas. As long as it doesn't kill you, it's accumulating the query plans that you're getting. Then a week or two later, on a Saturday or Sunday, flip that thing into 2016 compat mode, and you're immediately going to start recognizing which queries are problems for you and which problems are not. The queries that are problems, if you wanted, you could pin the old query plan back. Using Query Store, it's relatively easy. But I'll be honest with you, what most shops are doing is they're just staying on 2012 compat level. They're going, every CU that comes out, Microsoft improves the handling of query plans. So the more time that you take, maybe the query problems that you're having won't be such a big deal. After all, the robots are coming to take our jobs, right? The robots are coming in to make perfect query plans. Performance tuning is going to be irrelevant, and the robots will take care of you.
Yeah, actually, I've got a robot interviewing here in just a few minutes here. So as soon as I'm done with it. Yeah.
Is he going to work on replacing your floor?
Yeah, well, he better, or else I'm not going to hire him.
That's the first job. JH asks, sorry if I might have asked this a while ago. Dang, JH, start taking notes. He says, I currently have MAXDOP set to use all of my cores, but if I set it to lower to avoid CX packet blocking, CPU usage, could it slow down other queries? Yeah, think about this logically, and I'm going to use 8 cores just because I have 8 fingers to hold up on. I mean, I have 10 fingers. I guess I could use all 10, but 8 just seems like a more logical number here to use. I don't know why. Who cares? Pretend I was in a shop class accident and I only have 8 fingers. So say that you have 8 cores in your SQL Server and right now you're using all of them and you want to suddenly start to use 4 instead. Could your queries take longer? Sure, if you start using half the CPU. Now what scares me here is you said, I'm trying to do this in order to lower blocking. Dude, guess what happens if your queries start running longer? Your blocking gets worse, not better. So just make really sure that you know what setting that you're changing. There's a KB article. This is the only KB article I know by heart, 280-6535. So if you Google for Microsoft KB 280-6535, that's the exact knowledge base article on setting your MAXDOP. You can read that, start from there. It talks about the number of cores per processor.
Yeah, I worked on a large machine once. It was 32 cores, and on my slower queries, what I did is I tested how much MAXDOP it would be. Hey, what if I just ran 8 cores and 12 cores and 16, and I went all the way up to 32? And it turns out that if I ran with like 20, it was faster than it was if it was 32. So I just set that one query to run one of the 20 cores because that was the fastest we tested, and I didn't have to change it for the whole server and have everyone else was with crazy queries. Well, who knows what would happened if I would have just lowered it just for that one.
Data warehouses
are a problem as opposed to it fixing it across the entire server and introducing more potential problems.
Because every query you theoretically need different MAXDOPs. That's why you get different MAXDOP settings for CheckDB now as well. Update statistics in 2017 CU3 also has a MAXDOP command. Just all kinds of cool hints there. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us this week at Office Hours, and we will see y'all next week. Adios, everybody.